where those who perceive truth may strive to make others see.
A big, powerful America, and shoot them for what?
On that continent, we are trying to forge a new identity for which we need each other.
I want you to imagine that you're in the military and you're in the middle of a war, and it's your responsibility to get a body count for enemy kills. And in terms of the situation now, you're asked to go count how many combatants were just killed in a recent firefight, and you go and you have you find the bodies in a position that's kind of funny on their back, almost as if they were running away, and you turn the bodies over, and you see that one is a woman with a basket for farming, and the other looks like a child, likely her own. Today we'll be really talking about two books on war. And the first book is Cover Up by Seymour Hersh, and the second one is Soldier by Anthony Hubert. And we really want to discuss how these two books really help us in really understanding the Renaissance in general, and getting an idea of where we're at now. Now, both of these books are about the Vietnam War, and really, when it comes down to the understanding that a lot of us have is simply our government finding a reason to go to this jungle to make some old rich guy richer. And really, when it comes down to wars, that's usually that's usually the actuality of it, honestly. And in terms of this particular war, we left, and you'll hear a lot of debate whether we won or not, and it's honestly upsetting to hear this debate take place when you kind of read, particularly Cover Up by Seymour Hersh, in terms of the fact that there is a debate. It's if there is a debate on this war, it probably it likely shouldn't be on whether we won or not. It should be on the what purpose we had over there, and really what structures did we use in terms of what governing principles did we use while over there. Now, this guy Seymour Hersh, he's really known for really blowing the whistle, particularly on this event, and really exposing the Army, and and really talking about this surprising amount of dysfunction in, or not really, dysfunction in terms of accountability. Anthony Hubert, he's like his book comes on the dysfunction in terms of more so just the general ability of our military in general. But with Seymour Hersh, he focuses on a particular area. It's called Mylay. I apologize if I'm saying that wrong. And he really made this book cover up about his findings. And when it comes down to Anthony Hubert, he was a soldier and he was a whistleblower, and he mentions how he had an early life as a hunter, and really being in the kind of getting kind of his experience through really an upbringing in hunting and exposure to weapons and different type of things like that. Hubert was eventually let go on some kind of honorable discharge, and the soldier really goes over his life and experience. Like I said, he was a soldier in the Korean War and the Vietnam War, and he's actually pretty decorated, and was even paraded around for a lot of his accomplishments by the then president. It's in terms of like cover up in particularly, at some point a soldier mentions how what was done in My and this particular area of Vietnam, this was done all over, and this event was really not isolated. An important quote is, "Murder, rape, and arson were part of war," and it was pretty bad, because essentially, like, without good leadership, you see that we really just, we set loose savages on these people, and it was it's really disgusting in terms of the idea of these people gaining credibility wearing this uniform and what they were able to do in foreign lands. Now, Anthony Hubert's experience is crazy. Like, it was actually pretty funny, because it was just like, he's talking about really kind of his experience in general in the Army, and being a part of the Army, and he mentions how, like, at some point he was, like, swung on by, like, paratrooper trainers, or the idea was he knew that, or he figured that this was kind of not going to be a safe event, and he was telling the trainer, he told the trainer straight up, "I'm not letting my group go with you today." And the guy got mad, and he like swung on Hubert, and like Hubert like just kind of just weaved out the way in terms of, he thought it was a joke, but it was it became clear to him that the guy was serious. It was he had a very funny story, but in general, like, how funny it was really does speak to how much of a joke really our Army really was in terms of his experience. And I don't think it both of these stories end with a lack of really a real accountability, and and that would kind of lead me to say that I don't believe our Army or military forces are going to improve in any way, shape, or form in the future. And that's if they, assuming, with the mindset of are going into the future we will have in military in general, as the way it exists now. Now, he mentions how, how there's like, he seemed like he didn't quite understand how adept he was until he met other people who were going to be supposed legends, and how little they had to teach him about certain things. That was very, very it very much spoke to the idea of the real experience and power that someone can gain by simply focusing on their craft, and really by the time they look up, they don't really understand, where they don't really understand their placement in terms of their particular field. And in terms of Anthony Hubert, he's dismissed because he makes a series of complaints, and one of these complaints was literally a soldier was explaining how he was really confessing how he pretty much watched his platoon get slaughtered, and the idea was they were all smoking. They were all smoking marijuana before, and they got and he ended up walking outside with a small group of people, and he was the whole group was hungover, but he essentially he watched Viet Cong soldiers come by and destroy the camp and kill everybody in it, and he hid. He and this little small group, they hid, while this was taking place, and that was one of the experiences that that he really wanted to further investigate, and this soldier was essentially told, hey, look, you tell anybody, or you're not to tell anybody, and it was a very real threat by the people that were around him and the people who were superior to him, because then people who were viewed as his superiors because they were looking, they'd look bad, and they ended up basically telling this story the actual, it was an ambush. That's the way they explained it to the media and to the public, and that was supposed to be the story. But this guy was, it was eating him up, and he ended up. I want to say he ended up dead at some point, and it was pretty crazy to think, but when it comes down to a lot of functioning that happen exterior to the United States, like I said, when it comes down to these guys being able to essentially live like savages, there were commanders at some point who were there were statements from soldiers who would say basically the commanding general that was essentially doing his job kind of had a target painted on his back for everybody around him, or everybody under him. And this same event came up in terms of Hubert for this idea of there was a story of a guy who went outside a perimeter, and he asked for basically he asked for his soldiers to fire in a direction that he was supposedly in. It was kind of surreal to think in terms of I think that, in terms of Hubert remembering it, it just seemed like, okay, well, he what an idiot. But later on, they found out that essentially this was a guy, or it was a how do you say we this is not confirmed, and but there were stories about this guy actually having a target painted on his own back. Now, in terms of this particular at some point in Cover Up, he's interviewing a soldier, or they end up talking to a soldier who was drunk, and he would basically confess that they were killing everyone, and that's men, women, and children, and this is this is something that he retracted when he was sober, but that thought pattern, it was alive in a lot of ways for these people, and there are two different stories about this. In Cover Up, this is before while the investigation was actually taking place. There was in terms of the story, for the intro story, it came from the idea of really anybody who was killed was an enemy combatant, and there were no civilians. That was the official narrative for this particular placement. And Anthony kind of came in after, and that was weaponized against him eventually, in terms of really trying to just a bunch of higher ups trying to make sure that their friends look good when their friends weren't as good as Hubert or Anthony. And it was in terms of this this idea, Hubert's story in book was kind of funny in terms of just kind of how ridiculous things sounded, and really Cover Up by Seymour Hersh, it was not funny. It was it was very much like sad and tragic. You kind of got just imagining what these guys were able to get away with and do, and essentially claim. One thing that was clear through both books, these guys were able to get medals for essentially just being with the program, and get decorated and paraded around. It's silly to think, but a lot of these guys were imposters, and I think a lot of people, of course, when you think about the structure of the United States right now, we're not really allowing for the most the people to be the best at governing in the best in the highest positions. It's essentially the people who are controlled in some way, shape, or form, or I mean, if you read Whitney Webb's book, it's literally whoever makes it to the top, or whoever, the way the CIA operates is, it seems like the more they have on you, the more likely you are to make it to the top. And it kind of like this is something that I've seen with this particular in both books. And it's something that that's really led to us really becoming terrorists to these groups in these organizations, you know. And in terms of Hubert, there was mentioned that 70% of the enlisted people were actually in administrative roles. It was like a vacation for a lot of these guys, and essentially serving them was it was 70%. Like, in terms of having 70%, imagine an army going to this place, but 70% of your army are in administrative roles. They're serving you food. They're in food services, and it's really, like I said, like reading Anthony's book, it was funny because it was just like, this is like, you can clearly see that this is dysfunctional and a joke, and it was not, it's funny kind of like from Anthony's point of view, because Anthony is he comes across as very competent and able to do what needs to be done, and by all accounts, it seems to be that he is competent, and he even paid for being competent in a lot of areas. It was pretty, it was funny to see that, but when you realize the price paid and who pays that price, it was not funny. It was very, very much shameful for a lot of these. It can turn into and a soldier, a vet, looking at a wall and being ashamed of himself. This is very much something in a picture that is brought to mind. At some point, this is in the Miley book, or in the cover-up book, and it was found out that this woman was essentially, she was raped, and then she was made to check fields for bombs. And they tied something around her neck and essentially made her the bomb checker, because bombs were pretty popular, or were very popular in terms of really covering up and hiding bombs, so that the soldiers that come by would essentially just step on booby traps. But it was very dark, especially when one account was, she came out and she was so ecstatic, and at some point you kind of find out she was ecstatic because she was just raped by soldiers, and that was the story that we really didn't get when this guy was trying to explain and exonerate his army for and essentially just call us and tell people how this woman was crazy. In terms of the overarching idea, the idea is they were fighting against communism, and if you are not aware, like that has been our excuse to do unbelievably ridiculous, evil things in the past, and it has been it is, in terms of an excuse. When you hear the idea of fighting for communism, it's really our go-to excuse for becoming the bad guys in a lot of situations. And this was really what empowered Americans to think that this war was just in some way, shape, or form. And I mean, in terms of like the support for this particular war and bolstering the support, that was the idea. Very much something that can be easily contested, but something that we need to kind of in terms of using that idea now, I don't see that idea really empowering and gaining support for a lot of different aims, or any aims really. And it seems like we've gone somewhere on that front, and I'm really proud of the idea of where we're at now versus then. Now, Hubert talks about he has this particular account of how falling on grenades kind of became a trend, and this is something I remember seeing in a Captain America movie, and the idea was this guy is sacrificing himself for the good of everyone else, and and Hubert talks about this idea, because it's really unnecessary in a lot of cases, and just flat out ridiculous in a lot of cases. Usually you can dive away from a grenade, or simply throw a grenade out a window or something like that. But a lot of soldiers seem to think okay, this became a statement for this person was brave in a lot of ways. And at some point he meets a guy who supposedly did this, and this guy turned out to be a tremendous. I think he was, or Hubert talks about how he didn't believe he did it at some point, because this guy was just a plain-faced coward in terms of he spent enough time around somebody, you can kind of get the feel you're really not a brave person in any regard, and he got that feeling about that guy. It was pretty funny. In terms of Hubert, he eventually got command of the 2nd Battalion, and and this is up the ladder, pretty significant. And he cleans up to where this battalion really led in stats, in not a significant or not an insignificant margin by any means. In terms of the actual stats, if you line this guy up, clear winner. We're talking clear winner. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't really a competition between him and his other peers, but he was given a hard time. And the idea essentially was, they called it if you graduated from a certain academy or college or something, there was like a group of basically people who would look out for one another, and he wasn't in that group. And I know that's essentially like what led to a lot of this mentality of, oh, let's look out for these particular guys. And I'm really not 100% sure if that's what, like, if that was mentioned in the light of why Hubert was treated like basically like shit by his superior commanders, despite really coming ahead of a lot of his peers. So we'll hold off on that. But the idea is, despite being this clearly ahead of his peers, he wasn't treated as such, which is definitely something. And when it came down to Hubert, he was effective in a lot of different ways, but he made sure he had kind of a really good team of people, and of course he really really tried to lead by example, or really did his best to lead by example, and at some point he even puts in a medical professional that's kind of a pain in the ass, but this professional is, listening to his guidance. You get less, I believe it's malaria. It wasn't malaria. It was less sickness that a lot of other soldiers, or that other soldiers may get more of. In terms of statistically speaking, he was superior even though he was a pain. And he made sure to give this guy a real position, or make sure to surround himself or to listen to that guy too. He also made rules, despite this idea of kind of the army being a joke wasn't exclusive, to really people looking in retrospect. The people operating in the army who were competent were looking at this particular dysfunction while in real time as a joke. And a lot of these guys, they simply didn't respect the brigade, but he made rules to not openly disrespect the army or the brigade. And but he did find, when he was talking to this pain in the ass, this pain in the ass management, he found areas to be a smart, or times that he can be a smart ass, and I'm really glad that he took us up on that. Now, this idea of how his superiors were kind of a pain in the ass, this is really this is taking place after the investigations in Miley and this book Cover Up by Seymour Hersh. And this guy who was over them was really kind of trying to find trying to find that Hubert killed civilians, and really going out his way to do such. And I'm sure he would have been effective if he would have checked those other battalions, in terms of in terms of having a real reason to do that. I think they probably gave him plenty, but it did make it seem like Hubert wasn't a part of the club in a lot of ways like that. But that was essentially, this guy was weaponizing this the army's exposure to have power to do certain things, and it was quite something to see, in terms of you always hear about you don't really hear that side of the story for the people after the exposure and how it's used against them. And it's very interesting to see that. But in terms of cover up and the idea, it's a very, very it was potent in that particular instant, or they made it pretty potent in their particular investigation in terms of the idea that there were no, they call them VCs, there were no VCs there were no civilians killed. There were only VCs that were killed, and magically the weapons, when there was a weapon count, the weapons would disappear, and it was very much people who knew the deal, and it just seems like a good, in terms of the scenario there, I can see at some point it emboldened and probably helped recruit a lot of VCs when they heard about this slaughter taking place, and because at some point they made pamphlets that were talking about this particular area and how the army essentially slaughtered these people, and it emboldened a lot of people to join when they otherwise may not have. And essentially we gave these guys, these VCs, plenty of ammunition to recruit way more people than otherwise, and it's very much something that needs to be understood in terms of the idea that was kind of permeating the army, to where we can turn into, or just basically allow savagery to take place, but also say, okay, this has been exposed now, and the power of the public knowledge, what that can kind of lead to in terms of the corruption that kind of results from exposing these things. Definitely more to think about than we'd originally think, in terms of just the idea of incompetence, or or just blatantly being kind of the bad guys, and exposing how that investigation could be used against people like Hubert, and it was very much powerful, mainly in the ways that the ways that a lot of people were avoiding accountability. There were generals who claimed, they seen the pamphlets of this, they seen the pamphlets that were being spread around, but they they just kind of brushed it off as, the propaganda, and it just got to a point to where they could kind of reduce accountability going up the ladder more and more, and all through the way, it was like there were some very, very there's some very shady people in that ladder who were able to do this, and it wasn't easy, or it wouldn't be easy to really trace a lot of this stuff when you're essentially investigating yourself. When these, when you're investigating your boss or someone who knows your boss and has a real comfortable relationship with your boss, it becomes very difficult to expose that person for crimes without essentially, ruffling the wrong feathers, and feathers that could essentially affect the way, your quality of living in a lot of different ways. Now, what's crazy is the Army actually had regulations for how to deal with civilians, but it was really loose. It was like kind of, they went to this particular war and they didn't really they didn't have a iron process for dealing with civilians and what to do when they come into contact. So I mean, the idea of it, and it seemed to allow for a lot of what took place in terms of what these soldiers were able to get away with. And at some point, they were actually in cover up. They were actually it was a situation where a soldier mentioned actually being happy to see enemies at some point, and it was just what are we doing? What are we doing over there? If there's it was clearly it was bad. It was bad because of a lot of different things, but among such is just not having that real understanding of interaction between a civilian and a U.S. soldier ironed out. Like I said, they did have some guidelines, but it wasn't concrete, and it wasn't something that was drilled into a lot of the people. In terms of at some point the Miley investigations, you find out down the line that Hubert were reporting war crimes that were investigated by the same general who was responsible for the Miley investigations. And Hubert called out the soldier who was who watched his platoon essentially get slaughtered, but also other things like torture was a real big thing. At some point he literally destroyed, or he literally flipped over the desk with the machine because they were trying to interrogate people with electric shock techniques in the middle of right after a raid or something. They were trying to do interrogation techniques, and it was just Hubert was no, this is not how this goes, and this isn't supposed to happen here. And I don't know, you can kind of see okay, well, you got dismissed because you weren't with the program, and it was a clearly messed up program. But this guy, he's reporting all these things to the same general who's responsible for the Miley investigations. And the idea is this general, he was gonna make sure that the public didn't know anything else, or couldn't get any more ammunition, and he paid the price. Or he seemingly paid the price. later on down the line, we'll see that a little bit more in terms of how he would have paid the price if if it wasn't for like him being lucky, or and just being just his particular situation. In Cover Up, they even mentioned how there were like reports of sergeants shooting into crowds of civilians. They gotta, like, in terms of what they got away with and what they were able to get away with, it was insane. And a lot of these guys, they get on a power trip, and you give them a position to where that affects other people. It's crazy, we have there's some bad police officers that'll do the exact same thing, and it is crazy. But we really got to watch out for in terms of the Army, the repair of that particular, there doesn't need to be an isolated investigation. You don't investigate yourself when you're responsible for a crime or responsible for wrongdoings. That is outside people, and outside people who are clearly not able to be influenced by you, and that is in terms of the debauchery in particularly in that Seymour Hersh calls out in the Cover Up. It was pretty, it was stark. He painted if it's easy to come to the conclusion that we were the bad guys in that situation. At some point and Anthony Hubert has to address one guy who was really kind of just a straight up trying to be a bully in a lot of situations, and at some point he had to address this guy, and it became a altercation to where, or not he didn't have to, or he became an altercation to where not he himself, but he ended up being shot by an official in a way that was clearly the guy's fault, because he was trying to be a bully. I think he was demanding that some guy leave or something like that, but the guy ended up being really fast with his weapon, and it was something to where Herbert wanted to call the guy out, but this guy particularly, he ended up he was actually a black soldier, and they wanted to keep, they didn't want to have ammunition, and they had to kind of play politics with the idea of this is already an unpopular war with people in general, especially in the black community. And he had to kind of he had to kind of hold back in ways that that he wouldn't normally have held back in. And this guy was a piece of shit, but he couldn't say it. It was definitely something. Now this is general in terms of this particular at some point it was really, I think, in Cover Up, where there is a conversation that takes place between a preacher and some kind of ranking official, and the ranking official jokes about jokes with the preacher because it's in the middle of a storm. And he says, hey, why don't you ask why don't you act, or like, why don't you ask our boss to let up a little bit so we can get our supplies, you know? And they were waiting for like supplies and things of that nature. And the preacher said, hey, look, I don't think God's really in a rush for us to kill Vietnamese people. And it was really funny. But the preacher and the official, like, they never had the same relationship after he made that comment. But it was funny. It was funny because it was just like, the hell, like I'm here because I am, like, nobody's happy that we're fucking here. It was like crazy, but the guy, I don't know, like I said, like you put these guys through power trips in the wrong positions, and they simply have blinders on for a lot of situations, and I'm really, really glad that the preacher said that to the guy. Now, in terms of public understanding of what was going on, these generals, they knew that they had to control perception. And they held a tight leash on the photos. And, you know, like I said, they like, it seemed like they understood, you know, as a result of the investigation. But they did weaponize this, you know, Hubert or Anthony, he mentions how this is, they were using this idea of, you know, kind of perception to, like, move bodies and frame photographs, and really, really trying to use it to sell a narrative about anything that's taken place. And that right there is, it's dangerous. It's dangerous. And Hubert was like, you know, in a lot of situations, Hubert's hands were tied. Due to a lot of different due to various things in various situations, but it seemed like there was incentive to paint a narrative after people understood this about the war, and it didn't matter if they were accurate or not. It became a situation of this is going to sell and make money, so let's do this. And it's a crazy thought pattern, but at some time the idea of the idea that existed in the structure was see no evil. And this was kind of an unsaid rule, but a powerful one. You know, like the people, you know, going above the, you know, navigating around your particular superior manager. That was kind of, it was understood that was looked down on, you know, and a lot of these guys, they would shut a lot of this down, you know, in terms of the idea of, you know, I'm going to go further up the ladder. And the idea is, it's powerful because, you know, you think like, oh, this guy's going to care to hear, like, wait till everybody hears about this. And wait till, you know, your superiors hear about this, and you find out that their superiors don't listen to anybody who is in this particular rung of the ladder, and it's a very powerful way to, I've seen this play out, in particular, like, this is making me think of kind of the Great Famine in China, where the structure of command, was, hey, we don't want to look bad, and we're not going to look bad, and anybody who makes us look bad, they have to understand the rules, and that if that meant people starving, then people were going to starve in this area. It was it's dangerous in terms of this particular structure, a ladder, and it's just something that you really want to be careful about in terms of having that, or having, the and what the people can do in situations, and the concept of whistleblowers, and making sure that there is a place, and to where if somebody, if they, if there is somebody who is, doing wrong, people under them need to feel like they can go somewhere and tell these guys, and get, and expose, the wrongdoings. And one thing you understand about, like, Miley, we talked about how this guy was happy to see enemies. A lot of some units didn't even face organized opposition. You know what I'm saying? Like, this idea of us going to war was essentially, it was essentially, rogue people, basically, or, rogue individuals, or rogue groups of people, essentially just making life hell for the soldiers that decided to come to that land. Now, at some point, in the Miley, in the cover-up by Seymour and Hersh, they mentioned how this a high-ranking official that wasn't necessarily in that area, or wasn't responsible for that area, he wanted to he literally had to restrain himself from opening up on our own guys. And and the idea was, these guys were doing some, like, insane, like, just essentially, like, just absolute debauchery. And he even mentioned, like, how maybe we deserve a medal for saving civilians from our own people. Very, very disgusting and shameful, like, the people involved here. Another thing of note was how these pilots didn't necessarily have to be in alignment with the guys on the ground a lot of the time. And, they were saw as kind of under a different structure. And the idea of pilots in general, they were really known for, or not known, or they were really they were a tremendous source for the whistleblowing that went on, in cover-up particularly. Crazy thing is, they, in both books, have mentioned how the CIA was involved, or mentioned that the CIA was involved, but these like they outright asked Anthony, in terms of Anthony Hubert, the soldier, or the guy with the experience in the army. They outright asked this guy to like kill people and frame the Viet Cong, and it was crazy, but this was literally like I mean, this Anthony said no when he heard that. It was just like, but it was so like the idea was, oh, we need to get their get support, diminish their support for this war, or any type of support, civilian supporting this particular war. And the way to do that is kind of set up killings and frame the Viet Cong. And it was so it was outright it was outright evil to think, but they were doing it, and they made sure to do it. And they also, it came up that they were like funding they were funding basically a shadow government, and hired civilians to make lists, and they hired people to make lists, and at some point, like, one of these guys got really bold with flaunting his relationship with the CIA, and his ability to make people disappear because he put them on a list. It's like, it's really, honestly, I'm not sure how many of y'all watch Death Note anime, but it's honestly like that. Like, this guy was just like, look what I can do. It was like, this guy was, everybody, or nobody really, it seemed like nobody really liked this guy, but the CIA was still using him, and he was just literally he was literally a piece of shit. It's crazy, but this was that, he was able to do this for a long time and get a lot of notoriety and a lot of pull in a lot of areas. It's crazy. Now, the idea is they're see no evil in this idea of cover your own ass, of course. This going up the ladder that became a hellscape for a lot of people, civilians, but also competent soldiers included. That really that tried to do the job properly. And during this investigation, in terms of the cover-up, Seymour Hersh talks, there's a point where generals are asked, about recalling basically elements of, different things, but it's really crazy because they had a crazy short memory span when it came to recalling war crimes it was just seeing. Oh, I don't really recall that. I don't know what did you have for breakfast on a day, a week before this. Exactly what the you had for breakfast, but that war crime, it was pretty crazy. But I mean, like I said, these guys, a lot of these guys were they took their word as this gold. It was so oh, this guy said this, so this must be true. It was so crazy. But when you're investigating yourself, that's what happens. That's what happens a lot of times. And like I said, the idea of you know, these guys being able to get away with so much, it all came back to the structure of really, being responsible for investigating yourself. I can just see these guys like in like a real I've watched investigations on YouTube, and I can just see these guys like saying that and like having to keep a straight face, like literally. But everybody's like looking at them like, really? Do you really want to say that? And and they end up like a jury of peers would just say, yeah, like get this guy obviously is guilty. Is this like I don't understand why this is even a thing. Why do you why did he think that will work? Saying no, it's crazy. But in terms of this idea and the cover up situation, at some point, like they the some kind of account to where a general came by after this particular event took place, and he questioned he questioned, okay, are there any issues or problems or something like that, and the soldier recalls everybody kind of like looking down in a way, kind of being like ashamed, and they were saying, a lot of them said no, or some of them actually said no comment when he said, "Oh, is everything okay?" They just said no comment, and it was like I could imagine like a lot of these guys, a lot of these guys going home, and rather than the normal PTSD, really thinking of like a lot of these guys have to live with this. You know what I'm saying? Like that image of a an old vet looking at the wall at these medals and realizing that or really understanding that all these medals really came from essentially like following the program rather than doing anything of value. Anything of real value. It's, I mean, it brings kind of a new understanding of what makes some of these guys really, go through what they go through afterwards. In terms of the investigation, though, it was a joke. It was a joke. Like, you had generals being taken, like, their word being taken as kind of just the truth, but also like generals would lie and try to gain favor by commemorating other generals and trying to keep them quiet, and essentially trying to reach across and say, hey, look, I don't want you to say anything about what you've seen either. And this was a very, very this was a potent thing in the Army. But also like let me see, this idea of accepting false medals, it kind of brings a new meaning to the word stolen valor for a lot of these guys, and I mean, it's just flat out, a lot of these guys got medals and got rewarded for following a program. And a program that was in a lot of ways could be seen as corrupt. At some point, they even went as far as taking pages out of a report. It was like the investigation was such a clown show. It was like there was a point to where someone recalled pages were taken out of a report before actually like being questioned, and it was just so crazy. But a lot of people, that was it, that was kind of the way things went for a lot of these guys. In terms of this is like that was like that was more of a disgusted laugh at this next note, because it was just like I'm really like the idea for the crew responsible for the Mile 4 incident in terms of what was being covered up, or the main source for cover up. They had a nickname, an unofficial nickname of really the Barker Bandits, and it's like they were known, and this incident was known, and they were called the like imagine that being kind of an unofficial nickname, the Barker Bandits. That was really dark, but it also lets you know that just how powerful the idea of having that ladder to where your direct commander knows what's going on, so they don't say anything, and they chose not to say anything, and you have no recourse. And it's surreal to think that this was allowed, that people said this aloud, and people weren't immediately ashamed to hear it. And what it was crazy. But like I said, in terms of the way things go, it was it for a lot of these guys. Now, in terms of the actual investigation itself, everyone was able to a lot of people shuffled around blame, oh, I didn't get this particular thing, or, I didn't really see my desk. And at some point, some investigation came up to where they actually this ounce of accountability came into play, because it's just some guy was, he was claiming, oh, I don't really I didn't get that. And somebody shows him the letter and his initial at the bottom of the page, and it's just oh, at some point he literally says, "You got me there." And it was just I don't recall it as something as oh, sometimes my secretary would maybe sign my name or something like that. It was so clown show but that 1 ounce of, oh, you got me there, it was just I really couldn't see them able to get away with and being taken seriously in any type of any type of serious investigation, in terms of the investigations that take place when police catch a criminal and they have them in an investigation room. This wouldn't fly. This wouldn't fly. Somebody or this wouldn't even be taken seriously. But this, like I said, when you're investigating yourself, a lot of other things are taken. This is taken seriously and taken into account. at some point, like the people responsible for coming down with verdicts were like literally like, oh, he said he didn't do it, and I believe it. And it was just like, I believe him. Like, I believe he didn't do it. I believe this. It was just like, what are you talking about? Like, it was so crazy. But a lot of these guys, I mean, it was just like I said, it was life. It was life, and a very, I mean, when it comes down to having those, being in those positions of power and how you climb the ladder, I mean, it's kind of just the way things go. Now, like I said, this idea of My Late Ford, this was published and publicized as an isolated event, and we talked about how, really, Anthony tried to come through and say, hey, look at all these war crimes, and him having direct accounts that really conflict with this idea of an isolated event, and there was no real accountability outside that isolated event. Even then, it was very much isolated. Like, only some people really paid for what they did. This guy. Now, in terms of what Anthony was talking about, in terms of what he was trying to expose was, the torture and the report of a commander being killed by their platoons, and also, of course, this idea of a soldier watching his platoon get murdered, but also how he was actually relieved of duty and wasn't given a fair trial. He tried to bring all this stuff to light, and he went through the formal process. He mentioned he had to actually use a lot of his money to do so, because they tried to give him the cold shoulder in a lot of situations. And at some point, he literally found a bomb wired to his car. His family was tormented in terms of we're trying to like he was getting calls from officials, and they were claiming we haven't heard from him, and talking to his wife to get her worried. And the idea was this guy was essentially lying, but he called the guy directly back and said, why would you call? Can you leave my family out of whatever you guys are doing? And this guy said, well, maybe if you didn't. It was such an ominous threat. Like, oh, maybe if you kind of just dropped everything in terms of this investigation, it would, be in their best interest as well. And he wasn't, at some point, he wasn't really taken seriously in the actual investigation, but he did go and give public accounts about everything that did take place. He went on some kind of TV show, news. He got it published in some newspapers, and but the army, they were trying to paint him as this kind of this bad commander, and his soul and everybody under his command or a lot of people under his command were sending him letters of support and trying to tell him, like, hey, man, you did a good job. And it was clearly, it was clear as day that this structure needs a real investigation and a real, and need to see real accountability for things that that people have probably done. It was pretty crazy. Now, in terms of lessons that we learned for this idea of a renaissance, the mentality of unquestioned authority, how it was toxic to the functioning of the army in general, and really just soldier civilian relationships. Another thing was, soldiers should have loyalty and responsibility to the mission more than they do to this command structure. Definitely, the idea of having a structure of understanding, public, people, of really looking for an understanding of what's taking place, but also an understanding of how public perception could be used, or could be misused in certain ways as well. This idea of what an army should do in foreign countries when they meet civilians, any type of military, soldier civilian relationship, that needs to be something that we think about, and something that is more solid in structure in terms of how, because we really don't want to create terrorists because of how we interact with the general populace. Next is people should be trained on how to interact with the locals. This is kind of me saying the same thing, but really understanding this in the framework of you're in international relations just as much as you are in kind of the service of carrying out a war. You know what I'm saying? Like, these things and this understanding needs to be really, really powerful, especially now. We gain our authority based on, or we gain our our sense of righteousness on this idea of equality, and this understanding needs to really permeate the army, of understanding that really being able to define what situations make us the bad guy, and how to avoid those situations. But in terms of those interactions, like I said, your job is our job. If we have soldiers in any type of situation to where they have to do anything, the understanding is you're not only in the service of carrying out this war, you are also in the service of being an international relations expert in a way. And that is I mean, and we have 70%, or at some point we have 70% of people that we send to some country in the military that are in some kind of, that are acting in some kind of service capacity. Like this is more than important enough to prioritize the idea of, or to make every single person with, that you give a gun understand what it means, being in international relations, being into or a part of international relations in one regard or another.